What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Focused Free Fit. We've got a great episode for you today, Mr. Nick Jain. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well today. Thank you so much for asking.
Absolutely. And I did say your last name right,
Yeah,
correct? All right,
simple.
just making sure.
No funny words and
Yeah,
letters.
yeah, yeah, right, yeah. So I'm excited to have this conversation today. How are you doing today? Good?
I'm doing good. It's a little bit cold. My folks are in town, or came in earlier today, so it's nice to see them after a long time.
Yeah, why don't you tell everybody where you're at?
Sure. So I'm based in Philadelphia right now.
Okay, cool. Um, so today I want to kind of get into you've got an interesting background, so I'm excited to get into it and just kind of talk through some ideas and some things. As usual, what we do is kind of start in the early years, but why don't you just first, before we go there, tell everybody a little bit about exactly what you do?
Sure. So I'm the CEO of Ideascale. We are the largest innovation software company in the world. Been around 15 years. Our customers are huge organizations that people deal with every day. Pfizer, Comcast, US Post Office. And what our software does, you can think of it like a social network for ideas. So on TikTok or Instagram, you post funny videos of your cats or you doing a cute little dance to music. On Ideascale, you post ideas and people interact with those ideas socially. They like those ideas, they downvote those ideas, they comment on the ideas, they iterate the ideas and make it better. And then the goal is obviously you have this social network of incredibly powerful ideas that help organizations innovate faster. And these ideas could be everything from very silly, basic ideas to what snacks we should have in our kitchen fridge next year, or much more powerful and impactful ideas such as what should be our new product, or how can the US Post Office become more efficient in a more digital world.
Gotcha. So just to make sure I'm clear, because I love the idea, but it sounds like it is using the public to get a good idea of what we as a company should be doing or marketing. Is that fair or
Almost.
no?
It can be the public, or it can be or it can be like your employees. So
Okay.
most of our customers actually use it, kind of run two simultaneous things. Where number one, they're reaching out and engaging with the public to get the public's input, but then they may also be running private campaigns on, for example, more sensitive topics where they really want to contain the type of discussion or who has access to that information. We
Gotcha.
enable
That's
both.
interesting. It's almost like focus groups, but internally using your employees
And
instead of
social,
outside.
right? Focus
Yeah.
groups are kind of a one-time
Yes,
event
right.
where you get in a room, you get
Hmm.
people's feedback, and then you go away, right?
Yeah.
But if you think about any social network, TikTok, X, Facebook, whatever it is, one of the beautiful things is you could make a post today that no one notices today, and all of a sudden it could go viral in 3 months because it's caught that the zeitgeist or the moment. And that's true with ideas too, or it's just true in general with how social interactions work in an asynchronous world.
That's such a great idea. And do you work only with larger companies or do you work with smaller companies as well?
So our customers and our software is really intended for large organization. In all candor, we're pretty expensive piece of software.
Yeah.
However, we actually want and believe that our software is useful for smaller organizations or even individuals. So for any organization or individual up to 100 people, our software is completely free, no strings attached.
Really? Interesting. Okay. Cool. So I'm sure we'll get back to this in a little bit, but why don't we start a little bit with where you started out? Where did you grow up? Tell us a little bit about family life, early years. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I grew up in a mix of India and Canada. I was in India till about the age of 5, and then Canada 5 till about 18. Little farm town called Langley, near Vancouver, Canada. It's now become a suburb, but when I was living there, it was very much a farm town. Came to the US when I was 18 for college. And my family life experience, honestly, was like a very typical kind of lower middle class immigrant family experience. My folks were, the typical shirts on their back types of immigrants who, work their butts off in order to enable a better future for their children.
So India and Canada, really interesting. And what did you think you took from those experiences? I mean, that's unique. So what do you think you took from that helped you on your path or didn't, or, what changed your viewpoint when you were doing that?
Sure. So, look, from the India side of things, I think there's an understanding of obligations to your community, to your family, to your country. I think folks in South Asia have a very strong sense of like, I'm not just an individual, but I am a member of a community, whether that be your family, whether that be your town, whether that be your country, and you're supposed to contribute back. And then also from the Indian or immigrant side, it is the immigrant, the classic immigrant hustle. I know how to work my butt off and expect nothing to be handed to me. From the Canada side, I think I still carry a few very powerful things. Number one is I'm extremely polite. I do believe in the value of manners. Number two is Canada is known for its kindness. Even beyond politeness, Canadians are kind. And that's an important value that I carry with me, that wherever possible, I'm going to try and be kind to people, whether in my professional life or personal life. I've actually literally helped an old lady cross the street, right? Because it's the right thing to do.
I will verify what you're saying about Canada. I recently went there for a few days for business, and I was very pleasantly surprised. I mean, I grew up where it was very like, manners and that kind of thing, but everybody was so nice. I can absolutely vouch for that. And that was I was actually in Halifax. Yeah, that's really interesting you say that. Interesting. Okay. So you were in India and then in Canada, and then from that, you said until 18?
Yeah, so I finished high school in Canada, and then I've since the age of 18, I've basically been in the United States. So it's nearly 20 years now. Came over because I got an opportunity to attend a really good college on a mostly full scholarship here in the US.
And I think I read in your bio, that was Harvard, right?
No, I went to Harvard for business school, but my undergraduate was at Dartmouth.
Dartmouth, that's right. Okay. Because that was mathematics. Harvard was business.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Interesting. And one of the things that I thought was, so you went to Dartmouth and that was mathematics. Really interesting. And I think I saw you play poker, or you like poker.
Yeah, I'm a semi-competitive poker player, primarily in real life, a little bit online. And yeah, like if the entire CEO thing doesn't work out for me, I'm probably good enough to go play poker for a living.
Yeah, wow.
I would not. I think that would be a kind of a less fun and less meaningful life.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds pretty fun. I mean, there's a lot to that life. I mean, I used to coach a poker player, so I get it. But that's funny. That's interesting.
You sit in the poker room for 2,000 or 3,000 hours a day. You're not really building anything for society, right?
For sure.
You can make money, but again, going back to, I want to contribute back to society. Mm-hmm. And usually poker players are not building something, whether it be houses or technology or creating jobs for other people. Mm-hmm. I like that because it's an essential part of my life, that I want to be out there creating jobs for people and value for the world.
Yeah, I think that's definitely important. So let's talk about that for a second, because you want to give back. Is this where you see this? Is this what you're doing now, your highest zone of greatness or level of contribution, or are you trying to do something bigger past this to contribute?
Sure. So I'm in the middle of my career. I've been CEO or co-CEO of 3 different companies now, the smallest of which was $2 million in revenue, the largest of which was $100 million in revenue. So let me start. I don't know where the future will take me, right? I don't know what the greatest impact that I could have over the course of my life, though I'll always keep an eye open to that. But I'm really excited about what I'm doing at Ideascale for a couple of reasons. Number one, our clients are all organizations that matter. So when we help Pfizer or Comcast innovate better, if Pfizer innovates just a little bit better, thanks to us, that's a couple more diseases saved, cured every year. That's millions of people's lives or it could be positively impacted if Pfizer is more innovative and comes out with better drugs. Or if the US Post Office can give you, slightly cheaper service or slightly lower lines. Think of how many hundreds of millions of people are affected each year by the US Post Office interactions. And I get to be part of that, or a driving part of that, not just a part of that. We are the innovation operating system for all of these large organizations. So number one, the scale of our impact is really big. Number two, I really like being the CEO of Ideascale, because it's a big enough organization where we make a difference, where we're creating something. We're not a startup, but it's a small enough organization where I as an individual matter. Right? If you're the CEO of a 1 million person company or the 10,000 person company, doesn't matter how much of a rock star you are, you matter less. Here, I can actually wake up every day and make a difference to Ideascale, and like that. And then thirdly, candidly, I really like our product. I like that we are making innovation software. That seems like such a basic, fundamental thing, but it's something that a lot of organizations and actually, frankly, individuals need.
Yeah, I find I think that's a tough one. So what do you find when it comes to innovation? What do you find that most businesses struggle with? Because even though you interact with mostly larger corporations, I'm sure that a lot of smaller entrepreneurs could take something away from this. So when you're talking to larger companies, what do they struggle with? Why is it such a struggle?
Sure. So there's three things any organization needs to be innovative, whether you're small or big. And most organizations screw up anywhere from one to all three of these. Number one, you need a critical mass of creative people. That number's around 10%. If you have below that number, your organization kind of isn't past the tipping point to be creative or to be innovative. Number two, you need actual positive incentives to innovate and to take away the disincentives to not innovate. And I'll come back to that in a second. And number three, you actually need to give the people who want to innovate or be creative the resources to do so. Let me jump back to kind of 2 and 3 and what that means for a second. In a lot of organizations, when you come up with a great idea, your boss basically takes credit for it. You get a nice pat on the back. That's it, right? Or conversely, if you try something new and you fail, you get laughed at or demoted or passed over for that promotion. So at most organizations, you don't get rewarded when you succeed with new innovation and you get penalized when you fail. That's like the worst of all possible worlds. That's kind of the incentive point. And number three, on the resources, a lot of organizations will hire, really creative people and then put them in a metaphorical dark room and say, go be creative. No, that's not how creativity happens. You want to give people the tools, the technology, the money, whatever it is that they need to be creative. And that's, again, we really focus on the third part, but we are acutely aware that organizations kind of need those first two parts as well, because software by itself isn't the solution either.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next was, you come in and you bring in Ideascale. Now, I mean, innovation never stops, correct? You always want to innovate.
It depends which organization. Some innovation stopped a long time ago, and we see that all the time.
What I mean is like the goal, though, it's not to stop. It's to always innovate, right?
No, of course.
Yeah.
It should never stop. Tomorrow,
so that's what's...
go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry, I thought you were...
I was going to say, yeah, you're right. Innovation doesn't stop because remember, like what I love to say is if you're not innovating, remember your competitor is.
That's right. And what I think is...
They don't stop.
That's right. And what's brilliant about your idea for your business is that if companies always want to innovate, you have two options. You go with something like what you have, which then you would never want to get rid of it if it works, right? Because you're there with the company forever, hopefully. Or you fix... Do you think that lack of innovation has anything to do with lack of culture, which starts with the CEO?
So I wouldn't necessarily say that the CEO matters that much individually, right? Again, once you're 1,000 people or 10,000 people, no one individual really matters, right? Mm-hmm. But there is a matter of culture. And that goes back to my 2 points, right? One is the type of people you have in your organization. You need around 10% of people who are, call them initiative takers, go-getters, creative, whatever word you want to use, who don't just want to show up and do their job, but want to do something different. And that is a mentality, and that is a fundamental hireable skill set. And number two, you need the right incentive structure and org structure to enable that. That's really what culture is, right? Culture, if you go to read any business school article, it's people plus process. Mm-hmm. What I call people plus incentives. So like you can't really fix it just by, if you replace your CEO, you're not really changing that much unless you change those first two legs of what I was talking about.
Well, if you I always thought about it as, top down kind of in the sense that, it starts with the CEO being aligned, right? Like really understanding what the CEO, making sure that they're healthy and aligned with everything else in the business. So that's why I thought that's why I was mentioning that. But what would you say, incentive wise, what are some good incentives that you see that encourage that innovation?
Sure. So I'll offer two, one outlandish idea and one like pretty basic idea. And they're actually, it'll sound outlandish, but it's actually quite legitimate. Offer people disproportionate rewards for coming up with great ideas, right? Why, you think about all the great people who leave Amazon and Google and Facebook to go start startups and become billionaires themselves. Why did they do it? Because if you create a great idea when you're at Google, Google takes credit and gets another $1 billion business, and you don't get that promotion, you don't get that compensation, you don't get that fame, whatever makes you, happy in life. It doesn't have to be money, but you don't get to be known as the guy or gal who made it either. And so you actually want to reward those top performers with disproportionate success. I was having an argument recently about there was a junior guy at an investment firm, and he came up with an idea to make the firm $1 billion, right? And they gave him a 50% raise. when he personally made like $1 billion for the firm. No, you want
Sure.
to reward those people extraordinarily because the next guy or gal in line knows that, wait, they screwed him or her. Why should I hang around?
That's right.
Right. And again, money is just easy to measure, but the same is true with almost any positive incentive. And then on the other kind of tactical piece of advice is create a culture of experimentation where failure is part of the learning process. And a company, by the way, that does this really well is Google, right? Google has this notion that uh, experimentation is a core part of their process. They learn from it. It's in fact part of being googly, right? And more organizations need to embrace that innovation requires taking risk, and risk inherently means failure, frequent failure, in
Hmm.
fact.
Yeah. Well, you learn a lot from that as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think that's also part of the importance of that. Let me ask you a question. So, what are you guys doing with AI? That's a new big conversation out there. What's happening with AI, and do you use AI in your company, and how do you think that plays a role?
Sure. So I've been a big proponent of using AI kind of since the week ChatGPT came out. I use it in my personal and professional life insanely. I pushed it aggressively at Ideascale for our internal productivity. So everyone, whether it be our engineers for coding, our marketing people for content writing, our salespeople for communicating, we aggressively use AI, and not just chatbots like image generation, coding tools, you name it, we use it. In terms of implementing into our software, our AI feature actually comes out in about 5 days. We intentionally didn't like do all the buzzy fake launches that a lot of companies did last year, where it was just BS software. We
Yeah.
actually came up with two really great features. One which is releasing next week, and one which is releasing in about 2 months. What's releasing next week is an AI tool that basically takes in all this really cool idea data and evaluates it for you, right? Because normally it's really hard to take, an idea for a new, let's say, software product and compare it to an idea for shrinking your warehouse size. Those are qualitatively two different things that normally machines can't do, humans can. But now we have built an AI that does that really well. It can evaluate ideas against each other and in context of what you are. So if you're a burger chain, a new burger could be a great idea for you, but that same idea for me as a tech company could be totally useless. I don't care about a new burger, no matter how great at tasting it is.
Yeah.
So that's our cool AI feature, which evaluates ideas for you. That's number one. And then the second feature that's coming out probably in about 2 or 3 months is an AI that comes up with ideas. And again, like we could put out an AI feature tomorrow that like just cranks out ideas. ChatGPT does that free for all day, but we're really trying to emphasize something that puts out context specific and valuable ideas. So it actually thinks about who Frank is, what organization you work for, what are your organization's priorities today, and what can actually be achieved within the constraints your organization achieves today, puts all of that together and gives you highly relevant, applicable ideas.
Interesting. So I think that's really great ideas. So does it also rank? So let's say there's a bunch of ideas. Does it compare them and then does it rank them, or what does
Yeah.
it do? Okay.
No, yeah, it ranks them based on two metrics, basically. Number one, how valuable is this idea for your organization relative to, again, your organization's
Yeah. The
goals?
goals.
And then how practical is it for you, right? So if you have a $1,000 budget, but the idea, no matter how great it is, it's $1 million, that is impractical for you to do, right? You don't have a
Mhm.
$1 million. So it thinks about your budget constraints, your organizational mission constraints. Again, using the burger example, burgers may be a great idea for McDonald's, not a great idea for Ideascale as a software company. So yeah, it ranks every single idea across hundreds or thousands. And actually, we use it ourselves. There's a demo video we stuck on YouTube last week where we used it on our own. We use our own software. We used it to rank our own ideas about our software, and it ranks like all 500 of our feature ideas and saying, here's the ideas that Ideascale should prioritize in its product roadmap, and here's the ones that are either terrible or you guys shouldn't do because they're impractical.
Mm, interesting. Um, I want to ask one more question on the AI front before I go to in another direction. So AI, because of the company you have and the space that you're in, where do you see this going? I mean, I do a fair amount of research when it comes to, artificial intelligence and what's coming out, mostly in general, but mostly in the space that I'm in, which is real estate. And where do you see a lot of this going? I mean, it's going fast. And I listen to a lot of people talk about it, but what are you preparing for with the business that you have and in the space that you're in, just in
Sure.
general?
So there's three phases of what AI has gone through, is going through. Okay, I'll borrow some of the words that Gartner uses. We went through the hype phase last year where every company, worth their weight, and any company basically said, we use AI. Every software company added it, and most of it was just junk, either poorly built or totally useless applications of AI that you don't need, right? You don't need AI in every aspect of your life. There was a lot of trash, hypey trash that came out last year. In 2025, you'll see much more thoughtful implementation of AI, right? People who will come out with AI features that are not just glorified chatbots, that don't just look cool, but actually add value to people in either their personal or professional lives, right? There's robotic masseuses coming out this year that use basically the same algorithm that ChatGPT uses, except to give you customized massages. That's pretty cool. That's a robotic thing moving around, not text coming out. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So that's number two. That's kind of phase two. And that, I don't know how long that'll run, but that's really what we're starting in 2025. Like AI that is actually useful, not just hypey. And then look, the ultimate goal of all of the technologies that we're heading towards is artificial general intelligence, right? The idea that an AI can actually think. I don't know whether we're 5 years away from that or 50 years away, but that's really where we're headed. And all as we build towards that, what will happen is systems and tools that leverage AI will get in more intelligent from an IQ perspective, right? They can do more complex problems, and they will get more omni-capable, where they can handle text and video and audio and physical motion. Because right now you typically have an AI that only does text well or video well. The future AI technologies that will continue to evolve will be able to take information from multiple sources, but also put out information like a human being. You can signal with your hand, or you can sing a song, right? You can respond to me in many different ways, right? You can go do construction. You can go be a CEO of a real estate company, and that's really where AI is progressively heading towards over some time horizon.
So interesting. It's just amazing to see all the different programs. I mean, recently, just some of the programs that I played around with, from Notebook LM to Fixer to just it never ends. It's like it just keeps coming, and what it does, it's always something transformative. I just can't believe it. It's really amazing.
Yeah, like if you actually go, at the risk of nerding out a little too much, if you actually go read like the fundamental paper that's launched the AI revolution back in 2017, it was this paper called "Attention is All You Need." It came up with a really simple tweak that made it way more efficient for AI to think, right? Because the cost of like an AI think cell basically dropped by a factor of 1 million in 2017. That's what's really enabled everything to happen over the last, few 5 or 6 years, or I guess 7 years now.
Pretty crazy. So I kind of skipped over this. I think it's important, especially for what we talk about on this podcast. You've been co-CEO at a couple companies. Now this is your own company. What are
Well,
the
sorry,
most
I'm not the owner of Ideascale, to be clear. I was brought in as an external CEO.
Gotcha. So being a CEO at these companies, what would you say are the top 3 to 5 that maybe entrepreneurs can take away that you've learned with the success that you've had? What would you say if you're like, hey, these are some things that I thought I knew coming from such an amazing business school that I learned that were either true or not true? And what would you say are the most important business tactics to take away from what you've learned?
Number one, I think I've gained a greater appreciation for no matter how good you are or think you are. Like as CEO, you're not infinitely scalable, and you need extraordinary people around you, right? And that starts applying after about 25 or 30 people. No matter how good you are, you're not going to be able to do the work of 25 people, right? You need extraordinary people at the senior level, but also at the junior levels. Um, Number two is, and this is a really fuzzy thing, but like really focus on how your product or service creates value for your customers, right? Like it's great to talk about revenue and finance and engagement, but the fundamental thing that you're doing, whether you're, making houses, renting real estate, selling burgers, you're creating value for your customers, and you really have to understand and make sure you are creating value. Because if you're not, like, yeah, your business, then you're basically running a scam for some period of time, and that works for a while, but eventually doesn't, right? Eventually customers wake up and realize they don't want to pay for something that doesn't give them value or joy. Um, Number three is, in running a business, it's important that all the pieces of a business function effectively. Too many people focus just on sales or product or marketing or finance. All of those pieces are essential for the machine of a business or organization to work effectively, right? You can't have a great product team and a crappy finance team. that will prevent your organization from scaling and being stable.
Gotcha. I think you said something, value, and I couldn't agree more. What problem were you solving? That kind of a thing. How are you guys, how do you find, we've got social media now. I think a lot of companies, individuals struggle with marketing. And that's the one thing we really haven't talked about in all this so far yet. And I'm just curious now, what's interesting about what you do is you're getting customers to come to you and say, hey, idea, idea, idea. It's almost like you don't have to market because they're coming to you, which is almost kind of messing with my head right now. But do you do marketing? What do you do? What do you find the most beneficial? And what's the process you guys are using?
Sure. So we do almost zero paid advertising. I think I spent $1,000 last month in December, right? So really trivial, and that was for a very specific event that we were holding. So nearly zero paid advertising. We do marketing in kind of three forms. Number one is we have an incredible presence on our high quality blog. So if you go actually read Ideascale's blog, it's probably the number one resource for innovation in the world. Google ranks us alongside Wikipedia and McKinsey and Harvard Business School for the quality of our content. If you go read one of the blog articles, it doesn't mention the word Ideascale once. It's like just the best objective resource on this area of domain expertise. Just like Wikipedia is not trying to sell you anything. We want you to read our blog. If you don't even know that it's from Ideascale, who cares, right? We created value for you along the way. And obviously we hope that you come talk to our sales when you're ready to get innovation software. Number two is we hold events. And again, our events tend to be once every month or two. We tend to have webinars. These tend to be third-party objective speakers. They're not talking about Ideascale or how great they found our software. They're talking about something really topically relevant. So, for example, our November webinar was the guy who wrote who was one of the co-authors of the International Standards Organization Standard for What Good Innovation Looks Like. Right. So this is a government professor who is talking about and ISO is the same guys who write the standards for how big your USB stick is or what
oh my gosh,
what a microphone works, how they standardize everything, right? So
yeah.
Imagine we had one of those guys talking about what the standards for innovation are, and he didn't mention Ideascale once, right? I think there was a presented by Ideascale on the first slide when our speaker handed it over to him, and never again. And then the third thing we do is we give our software away for free to small organizations or teams, with the idea being that, look, number one, we're just doing good for the world because it doesn't really cost us anything to do that. Number two, some of these organizations that are smaller today will be bigger tomorrow, and we hope they'll call us back. And number three is we want the small teams at large organizations to use us, because when they decide to spread across the organization, will again be their first call. So if a 50-person team at Samsung, which is a bajillion-dollar corporation, uses us for free, it doesn't cost us anything, and if they decide to scale up, we're already there.
That's interesting. I love the idea that you give it to small guys for free. I think it's smart. I think it's the same to me as like putting out free content. You're just saying here, you're giving it out for free to have those.
We create value, right? Again, going back to that second point I said earlier, we want to create value, and we hope either through gratitude or practicality, when we're creating value for someone else, some of that value obviously comes back to us in the future.
Speaking on that, how important is it at Ideascale or any other company you've been the CEO of to have core values and make sure that everybody in the company actually is aligned with what those are as well? Has it ever really been a focus? I'm just curious because you've been with bigger companies and working for bigger companies. And so I'm just curious what you see in that world compared to like entrepreneurship, where we do talk about it quite frequently. Is it?
Sure. So values is kind of fuzzy, right? There's values like ethical values, don't lie, cheat, steal, kill, etc., right? But a lot of values become genericized quickly, right? Amazon says they're a customer-centric company. Almost everybody says that. Candidly, most organizations don't live it. Amazon actually lives that extraordinarily well from what I understand of them. But most companies' values tend to be very generic platitudes. What I think can change, and I would argue something that matters a lot more than values is incentives. What is your organization incentivizing its people to do? Are they incentivizing people to build a great product? Are they incentivizing people to keep customers happy? Are they incentivizing you to cheat customers? Right? So have the right incentives in your organization, and two things will happen. Number one, the people who are incentivized by those things will join you. So that's called positive selection bias. And number two, the people at your organization will act in the interest, self-interestedly. They'll do what's right for themselves, and that will align with the incentives you've given them. Right? If you give somebody the incentive to cheat somebody, guess what they're going to do? They're
Yeah.
going to cheat somebody.
Yeah,
If
for
you give
sure.
somebody the incentive to make the customer super happy, guess what they're going to do? Make the customer super happy.
Hmm. I like that. I agree. So you're saying that really carries more weight than actually core
To me,
values.
again,
Yeah.
I've personally thought values are always kind of amorphous and fluffy and they're platitudes that everyone
Yeah.
likes to stay and stick on a mission statement. I
Yeah.
think having incentives at every level of the organization that align with whatever your organization is trying to do makes sense.
Interesting. Going back to the people piece, you mentioned people value and something else, but people, uh, where do you find your best people? How do you find your best people? Do you think they find you or are you finding them?
Sure. So we have a global workforce in about 8 different countries. When we begin a hiring process, most of our positions tend to be like globally applicable positions,
Mm,
and we focus on kind of three things. Number one is uh, actually, let me start with what we don't focus on. We don't
okay.
focus on where someone went to school, right?
Mhm.
Literally, we have people at our company who have no college degrees or who went to no-name colleges, as well as people who went to extraordinarily famous institutions. But for us, we don't. That doesn't matter to us. In fact, I don't think there's any employees who I know where they went to college at all. I didn't even look at it when I was reviewing their resumes. Number two, we do a skills-based assessment. So when we're hiring people, we really focus on, are you good at your job? And that requires you being good both at general domains of knowledge as well as specific domains of knowledge. So anybody we hire at Ideascale, we want to make sure, hey, can you, use technology? Can you, do basic math? Do you know how to think? Do you know how to think critically? We measure all of those skills. And it doesn't matter if you went to MIT and you can't do those things. You couldn't name the capital of Britain, or you can't do basic math. That's a problem. You're not welcome at Ideascale, no matter the fact that you did some, have an extraordinary educational background or a pedigree. Um, and then the final thing we do is we measure continuously once you're here. Ideascale is very data driven. We measure the performance of that. So I can tell you how much coding my engineers are doing, or how many calls my salespeople are doing, or what the number of leads from marketing are. And that's measured continuously real time in a very transparent way. For better or worse, my head of marketing has to stand up in front of the company and say, here's how we did on marketing. And if people can also see that data in real time, and so that creates a much greater level of like accountability, but also we all know that we are headed in the same direction, which is every part of the department needs to excel. And if you can't fit that part of the culture, Ideascale is not the right place for you.
Interesting. And just out of curiosity, you said you're global, you're all over. How many of your like, what's the percentage wise employees from the US, outside the US?
Sure, about a third of our employees are in the United States right now, and about a third are in the United States, and about 2/3 are outside the United States.
Interesting. And does it end up being that they come from, when it comes outside the United States, is there a certain place where typically they end up being, or no, it's just
So,
all over?
so when I joined, we had strong presences in India and Bangladesh. Today, we also have a strong presence in Mexico, and we have a small presence in Europe, a small presence in uh, in uh, um, South Africa. In addition, when I joined, most of our U.S. Employees were really coastal focused, and we've also now expanded within the United States in terms of geographic diversity.
Interesting. Hmm. Um, Talk to me a little bit about the finance perspective. How important, um, from a smaller perspective, how has that changed, or how has that played a role for you as far as focusing on finances? I know you're focused on a lot of things as a CEO, but what story do the numbers tell, and how much attention are you paying to the numbers?
Sure. So numbers matter, right? Whether
Hmm.
you're talking about marketing, whether you're talking about money, numbers matter. I'm pretty dogmatic about that, partially because I'm a math guy, but partially because at the
Hmm.
end of the day, if you don't measure it, it's not real. When you go to the gym
Yeah.
and you didn't run faster, you didn't lift more, it's not real. You got to have some tracking, not just for accountability, but to know what's going on. So numbers matter. In the context of finance, let's think about it like what I would say is the ultimate goal of any private sector organization is to make money. Okay. You obviously want to do good for the world. You want to create value for your customers, but you need to be creating money. Otherwise, ultimately, if you're not creating, profitable, your investors stop putting in money, or, the company goes under. Those are the only two outcomes if you're not making money. So in the context of finance specifically, or running an organization, private sector organizations need to make money, and executives of those organizations need to make decisions that are ROI positive and generate value for the organization profitably and consistently over, any time horizon.
So for you, let's just take your example. So did you raise money, or did you start naturally and organically and grow and do like, revenue first type situation?
Sure. So Ideascale was entirely bootstrapped. It never raised any external capital. We've been around 15 years, and I've been with the organization about 3 years now. So never raised any capital. We're exceptionally profitable. One of the reasons I was brought in actually was we were doing well, but we want to do extraordinarily well. So I made the company extraordinarily profitable today. And it's nice, right? We don't have to go hat in hand to venture capitalists and beg for money. And it gives us a lot of latitude when we have either difficult years, or conversely, if we want to be aggressive and put our foot on the gas, when we want to be aggressive in either a marketing conversation, a product, or an M&A conversation.
So do you have a lot of competition with what you guys do?
Sure. So we have about 8 or 9 players that do similar things as us. One in the UK, one in the Middle East, 1 or 2 in the United States, one in Brazil, one in India. So we have competition. I would say we are the biggest player right now in the space, biggest or second biggest, depending on how you measure it. And I would say we do stand out in kind of 2 dimensions. Number one is our software is by far the easiest to use. Like, you could literally go on to our website while you're on this call, and you'd be up and running in about 20 seconds, right? We're as easy to set up as TikTok. You don't need to go through all these panels and knobs and buttons. It's super easy. Number two, I think we provide an extraordinary level of customer service. So for our customers, actually, you don't even have to be a paying customer. You as a free user could talk to our tech support team live 24/7 human tech support, right? Via chat, but there's actual real humans behind it, not chatbots. So, and our customers, love that. The fact that, like, if they run into an issue on midnight on Christmas Eve, there's going to be somebody there who can help them solve that issue.
Yeah. That's interesting. I was just thinking as we were talking tell me if you think this is right or wrong. Do you think that giving the product to small guys for free, small men or women, but entrepreneurs, to free, obviously it creates value, but does that help you do I guess it's not a physical product, but like get to market first type of situation? Or no? Do you think it serves that purpose at all? Because I kind of feel like it does.
Yeah, I don't think about
I know you don't think about it that way, but
it's not a physical product. So software is very easy to distribute scale. Yeah. That's why Google's $1 trillion company, and Hasbro isn't, at least today, right?
Yeah.
What it does do is it like aligns with our mission that we want to be the software behind innovation for everyone, right? Whether you're in Japan, whether you're small, whether you're big. And number two, again, it gets us there first, because small organizations over time do grow into larger organizations.
That's what I mean.
Or those people move to larger organizations, and we're the ones they're familiar with. They know we're good. They know we've been there since day one. And when I say there were no strings attached to our free version of our software, I really mean that, right?
Yeah. But it's a genius concept, though, when you said it gets you there first, because you're there, they trust you, they've got a reputation with you, and that's smart.
None of our competitors enable software unless you're willing to pay an enormous amount of money for it, right?
Super smart.
I want the people at Samsung and Google and Microsoft and General Electric using my software today, even if there's like 9 teams of 50 people each. Great. One day they'll realize, why are we paying for 9 teams or having free teams of 9 teams of 50 that are all segregated from each other? Why not just buy the software and actually have all of General Electric on Ideascale?
So let me ask you another question, because my mind's working a little bit better right now. So when you do give it out, do you ever track, because you track and measure everything, do you track and measure if there's any strain or how much of a strain on resources giving it to the small guys that is on the company?
Sure. From a technology or hardware perspective, it's not really going to strain our hardware unless something crazy happens, right? If 1 million people signed up for the free version of today, it might cause our servers to be slow for a couple of days till we upgrade the servers, but it won't actually put a strain on our hardware. And then from a people perspective, it's not really going to strain it against all of those million, free community users, then come to our salespeople and say, hey, I actually want to buy it, which would obviously be the greatest thing.
That'd be great, yeah. Right? I was thinking like chatbot or whatever. That's what I was thinking. But yeah, salespeople, that's no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Like if my salespeople have 1 million leads of people who want to come talk to them tomorrow, Yeah, they'll work their butts off there, but they'll probably be pretty happy to do so.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, okay, you guys, they bootstrapped it from the beginning. So what are is there any advice you would give to any smaller entrepreneur types out there that are like, hey, I want to be that big. I want to be some of these big companies you work with, but I want to make sure that we do stay profitable or we don't get ourselves in a jam. Is there any advice you would give to steps they should take to make sure? I know you talked about a couple, but anything else?
Sure. So look, bootstrapping is not always the right solution, right? It's great when you can do it, but there's actually some disadvantages to do. There's obvious advantages, right? You're not beholden to investors. You're your own boss. But conversely, there's some disadvantages, right? If you're bootstrapping, you have no money and you're literally, doing everything scrappy. You can't necessarily go hire the best people. You can't necessarily have software. You might be your own accountant. And that's not the best, highest use of your time, right? If you're the greatest product person, and you can't afford to hire a finance person or an engineer, that's really bad because your highest best use should be on product or sales or whatever, right? So raising capital can actually be the right decision for organizations because it allows founders to allocate their time to what they're best at rather than doing the administrative things, or it doesn't have to be administrative, the things that somebody else could do better. This is a fundamental thing called Ricardian advantage. You may be the greatest person at everything, but you are relatively better relative to yourself at certain things. And that is where you should allocate time.
So kind of like a strengths and weaknesses type thing.
Yeah, but it's more than that. It is when you make a decision in your life to do activity X, if you are in fact better at activity Y, you actually made a value destroying decision in your personal or professional life. So you shouldn't, right? You could be great at both things, but you
Yeah,
must definitely be relatively better at one thing,
sure.
right? You're 9 out of 10 on one thing, you're 10 out of 10 on the other thing.
Hmm.
If you ever choose to do the 9 out of 10 thing, you're still good at it, but you actually made a mistake.
Sure. No, I get that. Interesting. Okay. Gotcha. Um, okay. I think that's interesting. So, anything else that you think is important for someone to know? I mean, I think we've covered a lot of ground, but is there anything in particular that you're like, hey, this is something that people definitely need to understand when it comes to what you do or in your space or, anything at all?
Sure, I think software is interesting because unlike most products in the world, they only have end users, right? If you think about your watch, you buy a watch and you're the user of it. Software is different because in most organizations, software tends to have both end users and administrators, right? Like the people who bought the software configure it, but that may be different from the people who are using it on a day-to-day basis. So when building good software specifically, you have to think designing an effective product is a little bit different than designing a toy car or like a real car. Because you have to think about these two very, very different groups of people, right? The system admin IT person who is managing and configuring the software is fundamentally a different person than the one who wants just to log in and it to be stupid simple,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you have to
Yeah.
manage these competing priorities and build software in a way that works for both of those disparate groups.
Interesting. That's a good point. Um, so fun question. What are your favorite podcasts?
Sure. So my favorite podcasts right now are The History of Literature, which goes into like the stories behind the authors, behind the famous books of the world. Um, Second is Pop Culture Happy Hour by NPR. And then This American Life. Also, I think that's an NPR show.
Did you say This American Life?
This American Life, very very famous. Well, it started off as a radio show, but it's now obviously a podcast as well. It just tells stories of like interesting things that have happened to Americans in everyday life.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, I appreciate your time today. Any other parting advice or words of wisdom for either?
No, I'm good. Stay warm, I guess, for those
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
winter, the cold parts of the country.
yeah, right. Okay. Well, listen, we appreciate it. What's the best place everybody can find you if they want to sign up for Ideascale, or if they're like, hey, this
Yeah.
fits what I need? What would you want them to do?
Sure. So two things. Actually three things. Number one, my personal website is nickjain.com. You can see all the cool projects I'm working on, in my personal life. Number two, for Ideascale, our website is ideascale.com. There's a little big button at the top right that says "Get Started Free." Just click on that. Again, no strings attached, up to 100 users. And then thirdly, if you want to get in touch with me personally, best way is through messaging me through LinkedIn.
Perfect. All right. Appreciate it. Until
Perfect.
next time, everybody. Yeah, thanks for being here. And until next time, everybody, we'll see you on the next episode. Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
Frank.